guys, it's Shelly here. Welcome to my channel and thank you for joining me today. On today's video, I'm going to try and share with you how I do a blurry background. Now, I've only done this once before on this particular page, and a lot of you may have seen this page a few times now because I used this page for a how I color video on using paint pens for basing. And I'd already done the background on that particular video, and so I got a lot of requests to show how I did the background. The book I'm using is Animaux de la Forêt. It's an art therapy book and the artist is Caroline Allen. And I chose this book because, well, I did the first blurry background in this book, and obviously I know how the paper was working, but also because it's such a tiny book and I don't have the patience for an all pencil background. So even with regards to this background, first of all, I was inspired by Chris Cheng's blurry background. She does a lot of blurry backgrounds, but she uses pencils only. And I tried to do that, but I don't, and I thought that because it's such a small illustration, I'd be okay with it, but I found quickly that I didn't have the patience for it. So I did end up using a bit of water to activate my pencils. So as you guys know, I used my Faber Castell Albrecht Dürer pencils, and that's what I did on this page. I started off using them just dry, and then I decided to help with the blending process, I was going to activate them because I had the option to do that with the pencils I used. So I did activate it, and then I went over with the pencils dry to help with getting this blurry background. I still think I have a lot of practice to do, but because so many of you requested the video, I thought I'll give it another shot in the same book because it's nice and tiny. And I don't really remember what I was doing because I was just doing relaxed coloring and I wasn't really thinking about what I was doing, so it might be a bit of a challenge. I don't know if it's going to turn out perfect, but we'll learn together. But I'll share what I did, and I'm going to use the same same shades of pencils I used in that page to try and replicate it on this particular illustration here. And like I said, I've used my Faber Castell Albrecht Dürer pencils. Yes, I will be activating it with water, just to help with the blending process. Now, if you don't have watercolor pencils, that's absolutely fine. Just use whatever pencils you have. And if you don't have the patience like me to do an all pencil background, you can use blender solutions like Zest It, or you can use blender pens like Derwent blender pens or the Tombow clear blender, or if you have the alcohol blenders like the Copic or maybe Ohuhu, you could use those. And even with the pencils, the Albrecht Dürer pencils, you don't need to activate them with water. Blender pens also work really well, but I always just revert to using my water because it uses up the pens quickly. So I don't find the need to use blender pens that much, but they're really good for paper, for thinner paper where you can't use that much water. So I usually limit it to using it in those. But on this particular page, I'll use water because it's good thick paper. All right, now I'm going to zoom you in so you can see a bit better, and I'm going to try and work through this with you guys. Hopefully you enjoy it, and hopefully I do somewhat manage to reproduce what I did here. And if I don't, I apologize in advance. But let's get going. All right, so the thing with these blurry backgrounds for me is I don't know yet where I would place my colors. So I'm just going to do it quite randomly. But one thing I do know what I want to do is have a greenish part to the background on the bottom here where the leaves and flowers are. And that will be quite dark and then coming up lighter. And maybe I'll have a little bit of dark areas sort of around the framework, just on the inside of the framework, but around the framework coming in lighter possibly. And then maybe patches of blue to mimic or to give the idea of sky in the background, and a bit of pink to just again give the idea of possible pink flowers in the background. As always, I'll be sharing my swatches with you guys, so hopefully this will be easy to follow along to. All right, so let's get started. I hope I remember what to do. Sorry if the voice has just changed. I've sat down now. And I don't know, what shall we start with? I'm going to start with the greens because I know I want my bottom to be green. So we have the pine green. So what I'm going to do is first I'm not going to spend too much time blending or making the blurry effect. I'm going to, in this first part of creating the background, lay down my colors so I know what colors are going where. And I'm going to be activating it with water. So I'm not even that worried about everything blending nicely yet, because I'm going to use my water. Or if you're not using watercolor pencils, you can use your blender pens, like I said, but basically I'll be blending it. I wouldn't suggest using blender pencils because what I find with blender pencils, I don't mind using them, but I usually use them right at the end of my pencil work if I needed to use anything to blend, if I was not going to add any more color pencils over top, because the blender pencils do get rid of the tooth of the paper, so it's a lot harder to add more color over top when you need to. And when you're doing a blurry background like this, you will be adding more color over the top, so I wouldn't use a blender pencil. All right, now I'm just going in. I know I'm going to have these areas quite dark, so pine green is going to be one of my darkest shades, I think. Yeah, it's my darkest shade of green that I'm using. Very lightly though, I'm not pressing very hard. But I'm going to be darkening my shadows later with a different color. Not a green, but a different pencil color. So I'll try and see if I don't have to do the whole page background, because that will take me ages. As I always say, I'm quite a slow colorist. So it will take me a while to do a background, even though it's so small. But basically, I'm just laying down the green. I know I want these areas to be dark because I want the foreground to pop. So I just want these areas to be sort of in the background and not to take away from the foreground. And I would extend it to the bottom here, but because I won't be able to do much of a blurry background, I want to show you the main part of it, but I would also use my dark green on the bottom areas here, okay? I'm just showing you the bits that will show you how to do, or how I tried to do the blurry background. Like I mentioned in the previous video, I was trying to channel my inner Chris Cheng. I couldn't find her there. I managed to do a blurry background. It could have been a lot better if I found Chris Cheng. But yeah, no, I really like how she does her backgrounds. It's just not easy to replicate. Okay. That's why her coloring is so amazing, isn't it? Then, because we have leaves here, I think I'm going to have some green effect there to sort of give the idea that there is more greenery in the background. So I'm going to put some greens as well. Now you can always add more color later, so I wouldn't go crazy with your dark green, because if you want to darken up some areas later, you can. It's always easier to add more color, to darken up color rather than take away color. So I would say, yeah, you don't need to press too hard. You don't need to cover too many areas with the dark color yet. You can always add to it later. This is the part I found hard. Not the blurry part, but the part of figuring out, because obviously when Chris Cheng does it, I feel like she has an idea of what colors she should put where to sort of help lift the illustration or give the right impression that she wants for the background. I don't know how to explain it, but I feel like she knows where colors should go. Whereas with me, when I'm doing the blurry background, at the moment, until I figure it out a little bit more, I'm not 100% sure where to put what color. So I'm just doing it randomly, whatever makes sense to me. So there's a bit of greenery here again, so that's why I'm adding a bit of green. All right, again, I'm just using a light touch. Like I said, I can't really remember how I did it, so I'm just playing around. Okay, and hoping for the best. I think I'm going to leave it at that for now. I know I'm going to need to put in a bit more green, but I want to try and put in a bit of blue first so that I don't lose the areas where I might put blue. So I'm using the light ultramarine for this. I think we need to have a bit of blue sky here because the branches are till there. So maybe I can put a bit of blue. Again, a very light hand. And you just put it randomly, really. There's no rules, I don't think, to this, or, well, I just do it randomly. Just want to put some areas where there's going to be pops of blue sky between all the foliage, basically. That's the idea for me. So I'm just putting it randomly in this area. I wouldn't put it down here because to me, in my mind, there's lots of flowers and leaves. And so there wouldn't be sky around down here because the squirrel is down here. So, but in the area on the top, there will be pops of blue because, well, the sky should be there somewhere. And it would be peeping through between trees and leaves and things like that. So just put it randomly. And don't cover up the whole area with blue, but just little pops of it. We'll see how it works. All right. Just trying to think. Anywhere else we should put a bit of blue, maybe? Okay. Mine is, well, this is only the second time I'm doing a blurry background, so it's quite simple because I'm going to still need to develop my style with it, but it'll give you a rough idea, hopefully, how I did it on that other illustration. And then as I use a blurry background more, if I do, because yeah, it does take a while when it's a bigger sized illustration. But if I do end up doing it more, then hopefully I'll develop other ideas of how to achieve decent results. Now, I haven't planned this page, but because I'm going to put a bit of, I'm using the same colors as I did the last time. I'm going to put a bit of pink in it, and then I'll bring in the pink somewhere with the flowers. Just when I eventually color this page, if I do anytime soon. So in my mind, I would do flowers, sort of the pink flowers, just in areas where there is a bit of pink. But for example, here, the leaves, there's no flowers there. So if we look at this page, yeah, I guess these are just 3 main flowers, and then I just dotted the pink around randomly. But yeah, so I think let's dot the pink around randomly again. All right, so I'm going to put a bit of pink around these areas because I know there's flowers in this region. So we can make it look a little bit fuller in the background with the idea that there's probably some pink flowers in the distance. And that's why it's blurry, because it's further back. Sorry, this is the pink madder lake. Again, I'm not really spending too much time making sure my coloring is very neat. Because I just want to, because I'm going to blend it again, like I said, later in a bit. Shall we put some here? Because there is some flowers there. It'll just mean that when I come to color the page, I'll have to do, possibly need to do pink flowers, but that's okay. Shall we do maybe some here, because there could be some more foliage behind the squirrel. So let's put a bit of pink there. I'm doing smaller areas of pink, I think I've noticed, than the green, because again, the flowers would be dotted around randomly, so it wouldn't be a whole big chunk of pink. It'll be broken up with some green, which I'm going to come back in with. I just wanted to dot around a bit of pink so that I don't lose out on space to add in some pink. All right, then I'm going to put in some more green now, different greens. So we have the olive green yellowish. Just trying to think. Sorry, I'm looking back on it just to sort of, like I said, I've only done it once, so I'm just trying to think how I did this. I just went back in my notebook to see, okay, what colors did I use, because I'm going to try and use the same colors again. But because I didn't record that bit, a video on it, I don't actually remember how I laid it out. I just wrote down what pencils I was using. I'm going to try and, because I'm going to darken up sort of these corners, I'm going to do the olive green yellowish, sort of in the more shadowy areas. And then I'll use a lighter green to join up with like the pinks and the blues. Yeah, I think that's what seems to be working. So that makes sense. Okay, so I'm sort of doing it in the areas I will want to make darker later. I'm just laying it down again, like I said, because I want to activate it with water to blend it all, so that I don't spend too much time sitting here and putting pencil after pencil. I like doing backgrounds, but I find them challenging. How many of you guys find it challenging? I don't know, is it just me? But I do enjoy doing them. When I have an idea for a background, I actually really enjoy doing it, but it takes me ages to think up ideas for backgrounds. It doesn't come easily. And so I like to do my backgrounds first. I think I get a few comments asking me, you know, do you do your backgrounds first? What do you do? I'm going in with pine green again now, just to add a bit more green areas. And most usually I will do my backgrounds first, because I find it the most challenging. And once I know it's done, then the foreground is usually just most often mindless, chilled out coloring. I enjoy the process of doing the background if I have an idea. Usually I don't always have an idea, but so it takes me a little bit longer to think about what I'm going to do. But yeah, I usually do the backgrounds first. It's such a large area of the page that's already then colored, and it tends to motivate me and inspire me to keep going on the page in a way as well. And because I find it more challenging, it's harder for me to keep it for the end of an illustration, because then I'm just like, okay, now the foreground is done. I really like the foreground. I don't want to mess around with it. What if my background doesn't work? Things like that. So then I shy away from doing a background. It's very easy for me to say, okay, that's it. I'm not touching the background and leave it uncolored, which is fine. You don't always have to do backgrounds, but it's nice. It does sometimes add to an illustration, doesn't it? So I'm just adding some more areas of green to fill up the background. Again, I'm just literally doing it very randomly. Not too much thought to the process, but I want to add a bit more to fill up the background a bit more. But like I said, you can always add later as well. But and I try and so I'm very light-handed, but when so say for example near the leaf I've made a few more layers of the green, and then I try and blend out really, really light, because it's going to blend with other colors. So I try to see if I can do that little bit of a gradient with the pencil. I'm going over the blue a little bit because they're all going to blend in together in a bit. Shall we work with that for now? I'm going to deepen up some of those areas of green that I've just added with the olive green yellowish. should probably go on to the next stage now so you can see what I do next. So let me just quickly do this. I still want to add a little bit more of a brighter green before I activate and with water. But you can see, like, it would take, I would have to work a little bit extra on some of these areas. If I'm doing pencil only blending, I'd have to spend a bit more time trying to cover up the whites of the paper a bit better. But because I'm going to go in with the water in a minute, it'll help with that process, which is why in that other illustration, that's what I ended up doing, because yeah, even though it's such a small area, it was hard for me to stick to doing just pencils. Okay, all right, let's try the lightest green now, which is a light green, so it's quite a bright one, but it probably will help with a little bit of a pop to the background. One thing I did notice is you need to leave some areas of white. Again, because we don't want to cover every single inch of the paper, and with color, the background, it sort of helps with the effect of the background. So at this stage, it's probably a good idea to try and just keep some areas of white. And then, like I said, it's always easier to add color than to remove, so then we can always add color after. And that's why I'm saying, if you use blender pencils, it takes out that ability to keep adding layers, whereas with the blender pens or blender solutions, you can just keep adding more layers of pencil over top, or in my case, when I use the water, I can still add pencil over top. It looks really messy right now, guys. I was about to say it'll look better in a minute when I activate with water, but I don't know for sure either. We'll find out in a minute. Just adding again, a bit random colors, areas of the bright green. Let's add a bit here. Okay, let's try this. Where's my brush? So I'm using a water brush, but it's empty. I'm using it as a normal paintbrush because I've snipped the edge. A lot of people ask me this, why am I using a water brush like a normal brush? I've sort of just cut off the end a little bit, so it's just slightly flatter, and I just like that. It just works for me, and it's a really old one, and so that's why I use it. And the reason I'm not using it with water, I have a bit more control. So I have my little tissue here. I have a bit more control of how much water I'm using. And like I've said, with Albrecht Dürers, I'm just going to go in now with water. I've just got very little water. And like I was saying, with Albrecht Dürers, you don't need much water to actually dissolve the pencils and to blend them. And that's why I feel they work really well even on thin paper, because you barely need to use water. Or like I said, you could use blender pens and stuff, but because we're talking about water here, you don't need to use much water to blend it. Now you can see how roughly I laid down the color. I didn't spend much time blending the pencils. I did not worry about the whites of the paper showing through. I did not put much pressure on the pencil, and now I'm just going in and using the water to blend it all because I'm lazy and I don't want to use my pencils to do it. And it saves time, I guess, so it makes it a bit quicker. Still, I'm still slow enough, but it still makes it a bit quicker than it would if I did just pencils. But you can see it's all blending in nicely, yeah? And like I always say, go from the light areas into the dark, okay? Because otherwise, if you go from the dark into the light, you're going to be pulling all those dark colors in, you'll lose the light areas, and eventually you'd lose all the areas of highlight. So in this case, we're doing a background, but all those areas of white that we've left, or if it was an object that we were coloring and we left a highlight area, you'd lose that highlight area, which is why I always say, go from light to dark. And you can always deepen up your dark areas, because obviously even when you're going from light to dark, you're pulling your lighter colors into the dark areas, so they will look lighter than when you laid down the color. But that's fine, because you can then go in with more color and deepen up the dark areas, either with the brush or just with the pencils dry. Okay, and then the blues are very light right now. Can't remember if I used much of a darker blue, but I'm going to go over the areas. I haven't yet added more water to my brush, as in dipped it in water. All I've been doing when I'm going off screen is just dabbing it on my tissue. Now I'll just dip it in a bit of water, dab off the excess onto my tissue, and then go back in. So I'm not using much water at all, and you can see how nicely it just blends. And I think that's just a habit. Like, you don't need to, like, this paper is really good, so you don't need to limit how much water you're using. Well, you do, it's not watercolor paper, but it's not thin paper, so you don't need to worry about using a bit of extra water. But it's just a habit of mine that I know the pencils don't need so much water, and so I just end up using less. So again, the reason I keep going off screen to wipe it is because I don't want to pull my dark, once I've gone over the dark colors, obviously the brush picks up the dark color. It's a watercolor pencil, so it picks up the dark color, and if I go into my highlight area, it's going to deposit that dark color into my highlight area, which is why I keep wiping my brush on the side when I'm going off screen, so that I don't pull dark colors into my highlight areas. So now, like here, I'm going into my green, a slightly darker green. I'm okay to use it here, but now I want to go into my light area. I'm going to go and dab off my excess green and then come back in. I didn't use water, I just came back in, and yeah, so that I didn't pull that green into my pink completely, or my highlight area completely. Hopefully this makes sense. It's hard to really explain because technically I don't actually know the proper rules, if there are rules of how to use watercolor pencils and things like that. It's just that I've been using them, and I'm just showing my technique, how I have ended up learning how to use them. Whether it's right or wrong, I don't think it matters as long as it works for you. Like even with the brush, I'm probably using a paintbrush very wrongly by the way I'm blending rather than doing strokes. I don't know actually what the right way of using a paintbrush is, but I like to do the squiggly sort of motion when I'm using my pencil, so that any linear lines of the pencil sort of just disappear. Sometimes if you think that just dabbing it on tissue is not going to clean it enough, clean the color off the brush enough, then dip it in a bit of water, dab off the excess water, and come back in. Because yeah, you have to make sure your colors don't look dirty, you don't lose your white or highlight areas, things like that. So literally this is all I did. So I laid down these particular colors first to sort of map out where I wanted my blues to be, where I wanted my pinks to be, and the greens, and then I activated it with water so that they all blended, and started getting rid of the whites of the paper, and started giving a blurry effect. It already does. It's more of a watercolor effect, but it is. And then when you go in with your pencils, you will deepen up your shadow areas, add a bit more color to like the pink areas, things like that, and it will just and then you will use at that point your pencils dry to create the blurry background. But in the first instance, you've sort of created the base layer all blended nicely, to make it easier and quicker to do the finishing touches. You can pull the color a little bit into your white areas if you've left white, quite a large area of white. And then I like using a small brush. Obviously, if you used a big brush, you'd probably get this done quicker. With the small brush, you can get into all these little areas. Okay, don't want to spend too much time on this bottom half because the main thing will be showing you the blurry effect on the top. Just do a little bit here. I haven't gone too neatly on my I've gone over the petal there, but that's okay because I'm trying to do it really fast for you guys, because I know you guys know no matter how much I try, my videos end up being long. But yeah, it's okay. I can when I come to color that, I can neaten that up with my pencils. I can neaten it up with my paint pens. But there we go. Okay, let's leave it at that. All right, so let me see what it looks like on. Yeah, that's good, isn't it? Because we've sort of mapped out certain areas. It already looks a bit more blended than it did when I put down just the pencils. And now what we do is start working with what we have. I'm just trying to think. We can always add more color if we need to. Like, it looks quite patchy blue up there, but that's okay because that's going to be sort of the sky. So yeah, so let's leave it at that. And now I start doing my dry pencil work to create the more blurry effect and deepen up the background colors, like the shadow areas and things like that. So I'll just get my pencils for the greens ready, sharpened up, and then be right back. Okay guys, so literally now I've got my pencils and we're just going to color. We're just going to color with the pencils dry. So I've got a few different colors now just to start working with deepening up the shadow areas and just giving a bit more vibrancy. As you guys know, I like my vibrancy in my pages. So I'm going with permanent green olive, and I'm just going to work over the green areas that we've set out. And again, with a very light hand. I think the main thing about doing a blurry background is making sure you're using a light hand. You don't want to go in hard. You want to add more layers and just create the blurry effect. So I'm very light-handed. I'm going in, yeah, with a light hand. And then as I go out into areas that are a bit lighter, so like in the corner, I color a little bit more, not hard, but as I go out, I'm barely touching the paper to just create that gradient or that softer edge where we've finished laying down that color. Because you're going to blend with other colors as well. You're going to add more color. So you want to give a good gradient, a good transition into the other colors. Yeah, so I'm just going in and laying down the colors. You guys can probably see why, like, a lot of people, you know, want to see me do a page in real time, so basically not sped up at all. Like, I know a lot of my color alongs, majority of them I'll show you elements you know, in real time, and then I'll speed it up to do those particular elements. And the reason I do that is because it takes me so long. So if I was to do this all in real time, it would take me forever. Now I'm going in, so I've just laid down a little bit of that permanent green olive. Now I'm going in with my olive green yellowish in the areas I want a bit darker. So just in my shadow areas is where I'm going to lay down this color. Takes off the edge of the brightness of the permanent green olive. And the other thing that helps, maybe I should have mentioned everything at the beginning, but it's just things that are popping up. I think it helps to do a blurry background with sharp pencils, because you're able to keep a lighter hand, because you need to work less hard to lay down the color. That's what I find. But yeah, so now I'm going in with light green, which was our lightest green, bright green. And I'm just going over like the permanent green olive a little bit, because we're trying to blend them together and try and create that little bit of a blurry effect. Now, this is where I said that you can add color. So say, for example, I wanted to bring out my greens a little bit further out. I could have done the first green I used, so the permanent green olive, instead of stopping around here, I could have brought it out further and then done these other layers. So that's what I mean by it's easier to just add color than to remove. So it's nice to maintain your highlight areas, your white areas of the paper, because you can always darken them up later if you find necessary. But you don't want to lose all those light areas, because then you don't get the same pop to your page. So you want to maintain some light areas. So I'm just coloring over this area, giving a bit of brightness to those areas. And you can see it's sort of like when you have a light hand and you've already sort of done your base layer and blended it all, it's coming out quite blurry. I'm doing circular motions, not just going back and forth, because that would just create lines. So do circular motions. So I'm just talking through things that I'm noticing as I'm coloring, because when I did it the first time round on that other page I showed you, I wasn't really thinking, I was just coloring. So when I decided to do this video, I was like, oh, do I even know how to explain what I did? Because I wasn't even being conscious of what I was doing. So right now, as I'm noticing what I'm doing and how I did it, is what I'm just sharing with you guys. So hopefully it's okay. But yeah, circular motions, light hand, and there we go. You can add colors in the white areas if you feel it needs it. So here was just white, I'm just adding a bit of green. And then this area was a very light green. Do I need to add a bit more green, or should we leave it quite light? So I'm adding a bit of green there, which wasn't there before. You can also blend in the colors. So I'm putting a bit into that blue there, because I don't want them to look completely separate. In some areas, you want to mix them so that it gives that effect of, rather than them being all quite disjointed, you want to sort of blend them in together as well, the different colors. So like the blue and the green, or the pink and the blue. You have to be careful with pink and green, because I find it gives a brownish shade. But yeah, all right. I think I'll leave it at that for now, and I'll see if I need to darken up that little green area. And then now, like I said earlier when I had just started the page, I use my darkest shade I'm using to deepen up my shadows. I might even come in with a black actually, but right now I'm using a dark sepia over my darker greens only. So this is now to help sort of make the background pop a bit more, because you're making a good contrast. Like I've always mentioned, I like my contrasts between my dark areas and my light areas. That's what I feel helps make a page pop. And so now that's why I'm deepening up my dark areas even more. Again, light hand is fine. And I think backgrounds like this are probably, especially if you're using pencil only, is probably better with softer pencils, maybe. But I find the layering pencils also work really well to this sort of technique. All right. That looks nice, doesn't it? Hopefully. I can't see it, sorry. Okay. I'm going to go in with a tiny bit of black from now, just to darken up because I think this is what I would do when I was doing a page. So I'm just going to darken up certain areas. So there in that corner, maybe just a little bit under this leaf here, maybe a tiny bit here. Could do a bit near this leaf. But I'm not going over the entire shadow areas where I put that in the dark sepia. There we go. Okay. I'm doing this quite fast, so you can obviously use a bit more, spend a bit more time making sure your circles that you're doing your shading with is a lot neater, so that you can blend it a bit better. But if I do it, it'll take ages. Now I think I'm going to use a little bit of yellow, tiny bit, very lightly. I don't want to make anything too yellow, but it just gives a bit of a nicer effect in certain areas, just to break up that green a bit. Yeah, there we go. I think that's fine. All right. Do we need to, is this too bright? I have an earth green here. I can use that to sort of just reduce the brightness if you wanted. So I'm just going over the other pencils, and because it's such a light color with the light hand, you can just sort of blend everything together, which helps with that blurriness. So if it wasn't a smooth blend before, it helps. See, just go over those areas a little bit and it just blends it all out. Takes a bit of the brightness of the green, the edge off that brightness a little bit, and helps with the blending of these greens together, creating it, making it, helping to make it more blurry, I think. There we go. Okay, I think that's okay with the greens. Let me show you how I do the other colors as well. And then I might have to finish this off camera because it's already been so long just trying to show you the little bits. But let me do a little bit of the blues and a bit of green, of the pinks, and then we'll then maybe I'll have to finish off camera and maybe just show you at the end what it looks like. All right, so with the blues, we'd already used the light ultramarine. I think I'm going to keep the blues quite light. I want it to mimic a very light blue sky. So I'm going in again with my light ultramarine, just going over the areas that we've already put down just to darken it up a little bit. And I'm going to use a lighter blue, which will be the sky blue, to just soften the edges, make it look blurry, blend it out a bit better. Yeah, so I'm doing it quite fast, but I think when I was doing it, because I was doing it like mindless coloring, I was actually slow, and I just enjoy the process and, you know, take my time. I'm in no hurry when I'm coloring. Literally, it's my downtime. So you're always on the go the rest of the day, isn't it? Work and family and house things and errands, and you're always on the go. So when it comes to my coloring, I don't rush to sort of finish pages and things like that. I want this to be my downtime. I want this to be just that time where if I want to be really slow and slow down in life, that's what I can do. And so that's why I think because I could do things faster, but I just like the process of slowing down for a little while, for that little bit of time that I have when I'm coloring. Just slow myself down, slow my mind down, you know. Okay, I probably shouldn't do all the blue areas, but I'm just showing you. So I'm just darkening up bits of the blue area that we'd already laid down. Okay. And then I'm going to go in with sky blue, which is slightly lighter, I think, than the light ultramarine, and smooth it out a bit. And don't be afraid to mix the colors together so that you can have a good transition. They don't just look too separate, you know. So put a bit of blue into your greens, mix them together. It's okay. So yeah, you need the patience, I feel, for this, and you need to be in a mood where you're relaxed, or you're trying to slow yourself down. If you are stressed, if you are in a mood where you're irritable and can't be bothered, I don't think one of these kind of backgrounds would work. I think I've tried that before quite some time back in a Hannah Carlson book. It's actually, the page turned out to be really nice, but what I was trying to do was do an all pencil background, trying to figure out a bouquet sort of type of background, but I was in a very unsettled, not relaxed mood, and I very quickly got frustrated with the paper, and I just started, not with the paper, with I just got frustrated in that time, and I just started scribbling on the paper, and I'm like, this is just not working, and it just didn't work. And then I just used black acrylic paint and covered it up, and it turned out really nice. But the point is that I find that I need to be in a very, you know, la-di-da sort of mood to be able to do some of these kind of all pencil large area backgrounds. Or maybe it would calm you down if you were in a frustrated mood. I don't know, but it definitely didn't calm me down. So I know that the only time I can do this is when I'm chilled out. All right. I think I'm going to need to put in a little bit of other colors to sort of blend in with those blues. To me, they look like they're too separate, maybe. Put a bit of blue here and mix it in with this green. So you can just play around. So when you have a bit of space, so a bit of white space, you can play around with the colors a bit more. So those are all the blues I would use. And then I go in with my pinks, and I'm going to go in with Pink Madder Lake, which is what we'd already used. And I'm going to darken up my pink areas. So I'm going to make the darker areas sort of around the foreground elements and then come out lighter. So actually, I'm just trying to look at the pinks I've pulled out. This is probably the lightest pink I actually have. So the others are going to be used in the centers. So my light areas are basically the areas that we lay down as a base. Yeah. All right, and then I'm going in with a bit of rose carmine. So different sort of shades of pink, but I'm going to use it in the darker areas, I think. And come out light. There we go. Okay. Yeah, and then I've got Pale Geranium Lake, just to add a hint of reddish, you know, depth to the pink areas. And then fuchsia. Okay. And then I'll probably go in, because I don't like the transition there, it's too sudden. So I'm going to go in with my Pink Madder Lake, was it? Yeah. Lightest pink too. Just blend it a bit better. So you can go over your other ones to help sort of blend everything very lightly. I feel like this sort of background, even if you're in a hurry, it's probably not the best time to do it. Like I'm finding right now I want to speed up because obviously it's taking out so much time from you guys, but I can't. If I speed up, I'm not going to get the blend or the blurriness nicely. It's not going to look blurry. And there'll be more work later on to make it look blurry. So there we go. Okay. I'm not going to mess around too much, but basically that's how I would work with my pink areas. So I'm bringing in a bit of pink sort of into the other areas, just to sort of give a bit of transition. I'm going to use a different color, which will be white, to also help with blending a bit in the highlight areas. So I haven't done those greens yet, actually. Yeah, okay. Then I feel like maybe adding a little bit of green, sort of bringing this green slightly down just to break up those areas of pink and blue, to make it look like they're all sort of breaking through. So like the sky is breaking through the pinks and greens, because if it's too separate, then I don't know if it works as well. So just bring out a bit of the light green. Bring in a bit of green here too. Yeah. Okay. I'll stop messing around too much. All right. So what does that look like now? Yeah, that looks okay-ish. It looks quite disjointed there though, doesn't it? I think I need to darken up some of those areas. Let's go in with my permanent green because I've got so much bright green area. Maybe what I can try and do is the rest of the background, I will try and do it to music, so it's sped up, just so you can see me actually do the rest of it. But if I do it in real time here, it'll take me ages to perfect it, yeah? All right, so a bit of the olive green yellowish. So that's why I'm saying, like, you know, you can add the colors to certain areas and just sort of work with it and deepen them up. And I just going back and forth, yeah, until you're happy with how it's looking. Yeah. Now, one more thing I want to show you before I go and speed it up to music is let's put a bit more green here. I use the white to blend out the edges into the lightest areas. Then blend out the edges of all the other colors into the lightest areas, just to help with that blurry effect. But you can see when you work, if you work slowly, if you do your circular motions, if you have a light hand and you just keep adding layers, so go in with the light, add your darkest layers, like first have a mid-tone or a light tone, then add darker colors over top to darken up the shadow areas, and just keep working with it, and you can get your blurry effect, yeah? All right, I think, let me show you the white now. I hope this actually works. Hopefully I've got enough color down. That's all I'm thinking. I'm just thinking, do I want to add any more color anywhere? I'm just going in with my sky blue. I want areas of white in the sky as well. That's why I haven't just gone ahead and done all blue. Just helps with it popping, really, if you have light areas and dark areas. Yeah, I think that's okay. I think I should stop fiddling. I just feel like this area is too low down, so let's just go in with a bit of green just to bring in some green up there. So basically that's all I do. I just keep, if you manage to maintain light areas and manage to maintain whites of the paper, you can then keep adding color over top to get it to the point that you're happy with it. Yeah. I just felt that the sky was too low in that area, and so I decided to bring in a bit more green. And I just remembered that I'd used earth green to just reduce the brightness a bit. As the pencils get smaller, it's harder to sharpen them. Even though I used a handheld sharpener, I find it a bit harder to sharpen them with that. So they don't look, this one doesn't look perfectly sharpened. As long as I have a sharp point, I don't mind until this pencil finishes. Just taking the edge off with my earth green, just taking the edge off that brightness. I don't want everything to be too bright, so it just helps dampen down that. I think. Like I said, I'm just experimenting today as well, because I can't actually remember exactly how I did it. All right, so we have our areas of a bit of green again, and we have a bit of blue, we have a bit of pink in certain areas. And then I would use, once you're happy with your laydown of colors, I'm just trying to think if I am, then you can go ahead and in the highlights, so the lightest areas, use a bit of white to blend out the edges, to soften those edges, to make them a bit more blurry. So I'm going to go in with my white so that I stop messing around and taking too much of your time. And I'm just going to go into like light areas and just sort of blend out those edges, smooth them out, make them look blurry. You can go over some of the other colors which are light. You don't want to go over the darkest areas because that's just going to reduce the intensity of your shadows. You don't want to change your shadow areas. But the light areas, you can use the white pencil over and just sort of smooth it out and blend it all. And I'm putting a bit more pressure at this stage because I'm not going to be going in with more color in those areas. Hopefully I don't need to, but I just want to show you how I did it so that it's complete before I speed up. But you can probably, I would do this part with the white pencil, I would do right at the end. Once I know I've got my colors all in the right places, I've got the amount of color I want in each area, I've got my depth to my shadow areas, I've got my highlights. Because once you add the pencil and with a bit more pressure, this is like sort of not really burnishing, but you know, you're putting a bit of pressure, you're using up that tooth of the paper, and so you're less likely to be able to get good effects now, especially blurry effects. Once you go over these specific areas where you've pressed down harder, you've used up the tooth of the paper. But it does help to just blend out those edges of those colors. and blur it up. Look, like here, can you see how it's blurred up that area? So here, I'm just going to bring it in a bit into those areas, blur it up. Do you see that? And you can use, if I'm using a white pencil in the highlight areas. In the dark areas, if you need to still blend it more, because if you see that, oh, I can see the pencil strokes, it doesn't look too blurry, you can use a blender pencil at this stage if you wanted to help with that blurring effect. So here, I'm using my white pencil and I'm blurring it up, the edges, at the highlight areas, see? Blurring it up there. I think that's worked, hasn't it? I haven't yet finished these areas, but I did do the blue and the pink, so let's just blend these a little bit. See, I'm just bringing it a little bit into those darker shades, just... I'm not going too much into those areas because I haven't yet laid down my darker shades of green yet, but the blue we can do, you see? And you can just, over the light areas, you can use white. Then the dark areas, if you feel like it's not perfectly blurry for you, then take out a blender pencil. I'm sorry, I'm getting mine because I don't always use this. Sorry for the noise. Sharpen it. Let me sharpen it and I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. I was using the electric sharpener, so I didn't want it to make too much noise. But that's the Derwent blender I'm using. Okay, I've got it a fine point, but because it's so soft, it does always break on me because I press too hard. But you can go over the darker areas. I didn't use a white pencil over these areas because I don't want it to take away the darkness. I don't want it to change the color of my shadow areas. So using a colorless pencil blender at this stage, you're not really mixing all your colors, you're just blending out, getting rid of the tooth of the paper and making it look a bit more blurry, see? I don't know if it shows on camera, but I can see that there was a little bit of pencil, white of the paper still showing, a bit of pencil texture showing. And when I go in with the pencil, with the blender pencil, it sort of gets rid of it. But now it won't be as easy to color over those particular areas because I'm getting rid of the tooth of the paper. But you can use this at in the dark areas without having to change the color of your dark areas or reduce the intensity of the dark areas. You see, and just blend it out and it gives the blurry effect. If you find it necessary, if you've spent more time than I have trying to do your circular motions, you will not need to do this. I don't think I did it in the last page. But now that looks like there's less pencil texture. Let's see if I can see that. Yeah, so it looks a bit more blurry. All right. What do you guys think? I think it will work. I think it does look blurry. And I think I'm going to do the rest of it to music so I can speed it up, because otherwise you guys will be here for absolutely ages, and I'm sure you have lots of other fun things to do during the day than to just sit here and watch me do circular motions with my pencils. All right, guys, so hopefully you get a rough idea from this video of how I did the blurry background. Like I said, I'm still experimenting. I want to learn how to basically distribute the colors a bit better, but that will come with practice, so I'm not worried. And I'm not worried I shared this with you even though it doesn't look perfect. I think it's sort of every time you do it you learn, right? So I feel like once I've darkened up all these areas, it will look nice. So I'm going to go ahead, put on the music, speed it up and finish off this, at least this area up here, so at least you can see it completed as well, and you can just see me still work and work and work with these areas until the blurry effect is finished. But yes, it's not a slow technique, it does take a while, so you do have to be patient, and that's why I chose such a small book. But that's how I use my Albrecht Dürer pencils, and I think the base layer, just activating it with water or using your own pencils dry and using blenders really helps just get down that base layer and blend it all together. It gives you that blurry effect already, and so you're not putting as much hard work into getting the blurry effect. Once you've done that base layer, it gives you that blurry effect, and then you're just working to deepen up certain areas. And yeah, so that's how I did it with my Albrecht Dürer pencils, and I was really glad it worked with activating them. Yeah, hopefully you enjoyed the video, and hopefully you liked, hopefully I explained it well, at least explained it how I did it well enough for you guys to play around and try it out for yourselves. All right, guys, I'll leave you to the music now, and I'll try and finish this off for you. Hopefully it doesn't take me too long, and I'll be back with you guys on another video. I hope whoever requested for this video enjoys it. Let me know, and if you try it out, please share it with me. I want to see what your results are, and I want to see how you guys distribute your colors. It might, you know, give me inspiration to try and improve or figure out where colors should be when you do a blurry background. So yeah, share your versions with me. All right, guys, have a lovely weekend, and I'll be back with you guys very soon, hopefully. So until then, take care. Thank you for watching, as always, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.